Welcome back to the Bytes and Bytes podcast. I am your host, Kristin King, and welcome to the official start of season 3. I love a conversation that makes me smarter. This is one of those. Danielle Jablanski is someone I could talk to for hours. And honestly, we almost did. She thinks differently, connects things most people don't see, and challenges ideas in ways that leaves you with more questions than you started with. If you care about keeping food systems running and running safely, you're going to want to hear all this episode. This one goes everywhere, and I do mean everywhere, so definitely buckle up. Let's get into it.
This has to be publicly stated. I've gotten 2 of the best phishing texts recently that I've ever seen. So last week I got one that said, "Are you free tomorrow? ? Let's go to the beach and eat grilled crocodile. Cannot make this up. We'll send you the screenshot." Then today I got one that said, "Hey Matt." I forget, I deleted it, but they said some name. My name's not Matt. Obviously, they said, "Hey Matt, Deborah said you make the best cakes and that they save your soul," or something like that. Can I get one?
No.
Like, first of all, I can't bake to save my life, but yeah. So I just thought for your podcast, this was wonderful. These 2 words coming together: eating crocodile, baking cakes, and spearfishing, I guess, via SMS fishing.
Not just baking cakes, but ones that save your soul or something.
I knew I shouldn't have deleted it. Immediately, I was like, I have to tell Kristin about this. And I got rid of it because I'm like, I'll respond, right? Just to mess with. I'm that person that will reply back and be like, well, what are you hankering for? Lavender? Just to see. But
wow, that's intense. Those are some of the more creative ones I've heard recently. I get them all the time too, and I just ignore them.
I also live outside of Dallas, so I'm like, what beach are we going to? Like, there are alligators, so I'll give you that.
But that's not necessarily meaning you want to eat them. Like,
no, and yeah, what does that say about me that somebody said, you know what, this is the urgency that will get Danielle?
Or seriously, who are these people that are sitting in a room with like 25 million screens of like text messages up in front of them that are like, this will work. This will be a hook.
Yeah. And also, I don't know if you've seen Bridesmaids, which is like 100 years old now, but she closes her bake shop or whatever. And there's this like line, and it's like, "You made good cakes, Annie." And it's like trying to cheer her up. And I think of that line all the time. So like whenever I'm like having a bad day, I'm like, "They were good cakes, Annie."
Whatever helps with the mental health of getting to the next moment, I'm here for that.
Again, I can't bake, but you made good cakes, Annie. So anyway, those are my, you can use those in your next spearfishing attempt.
I don't bake. I'm not about that measurement life.
No,
I don't really.
Yeah, if it has to be precise, I'm out.
No, I like cooking because you can kind of be like a dash of this, a thing of that. Taste it. Is it okay? That's fine. I can do that. Too watery,
add in flour, some breadcrumbs. You're good to go. You can always save it if something's gone awry, right? The heat's too high, bring it down. Yep. Something's sticking. Yeah, the oil. Like, I can cook. I cannot.
Yeah. I mean, I like to be clear. I can bake. I just choose not to because I'm not about the measurement life. I don't really want to spend time faffing with a scale or, proper cup measure. I just can't. There's so much effort that doesn't need to be put forward from me. And
definitely a science. But all these food things that keep popping in. Now I think of you every time I think of like anything that has some intersection with food, like the emails I was telling you about earlier, where we use all these food related jargon. And now I'm like, ew, does this bother people? Like, we're not actually throwing spaghetti at the wall,
I appreciate that. That's nice that you think of me when you think of stuff like that. But I have other people who think of me when they're making dinner and they're about to, cut chicken and they have to remind themselves not to wash it. And they think of me like yelling at them, which I've never done. I guess my personality just dictates I'm screaming at people. Yeah, I appreciate that people are thinking about food safety with me, even though I'm not a food safety professional. But on behalf of the food safety community that I do work with, they're happy to hear that. But
I did think it's kind of wild. I listened to your recording with Kylie, and I don't know if I think I mentioned to you once before. She brings up the Tyson facility in Arkansas. And I grew up in Southern Missouri. And so we used to play them in football. There's a high school right next to that plant. Right next to it. Thank you. You knew immediately. And so I know distinctly growing up what that plant smells like.
Yeah.
And
That's
that is
gross.
my memory. But their security team, they have a great security team. Matt,
We actually live close to a water treatment facility here. It's at the base of our estate. And there's been people that have been asking, like, does it smell? No. I mean, you have to get really on top of it for it to smell, even on a hot day, because it's modernized and it doesn't smell anymore. I wanted to say to people who are kind of like, oh, I bet it stinks there or whatever. I'm like, have you ever lived next to a chicken house? I just want to say that, like, but I know there's some kind of like social faux pas that I cannot say that.
Yeah,
so I do not. But it's so funny to me that people are so misinformed on what things are and how they should be and what they are. I mean, this isn't like the 60s or the 50s where, yes, wastewater treatment facilities kind of smell gross, but like now it doesn't really smell.
Yeah,
the only time you're ever going to catch it is if they're burning the methane off. And even then, you probably won't smell it. It's wild to me. But yeah, chicken houses stink. There was one next door where I think one of my family members used to live. And I always, as a child, thought it was a very strange, but also a very exciting place. I was equally intrigued and disgusted at the same time. Which
I bet. Yeah.
I feel like that's a constant in my professional career anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, I bet.
Anyways, since we've been talking for a few minutes here, Danielle, I need to ask you what I ask every guest: favorite food and favorite food memory. They do not need to be the same thing. And then when we're done with that, we'll go into introductions so everybody knows who does not know you, who probably knows you. A lot of people know you listening.
So this is kind of controversial. Like this might be as controversial as pineapple on pizza. But one of my favorite foods is a comfort food. And some people call it like tuna casserole. I grew up calling it tuna mac, but it's like the casserole bake that's like macaroni. And my parents always used extra sharp cheese, tuna, and then you take the top off and let the top crisp. So, but some people think like hot tuna is disgusting, but that's like my comfort food. So tuna mac or tuna casserole. And I add green peas just to spite my family because they never put veggies in it. But I never ate it growing up. It was like a family dish because it was cheap, super cheap, right? Tuna and pasta. And then they'd spring for the good cheese, extra sharp. But I would just have like butter noodles. I was like, ew. And now it's like my favorite comfort food. My dad makes it every time I come home. We'd like have it Sunday when we watch football when I was in high school and I finally started eating it. And yeah, I add the green peas to it myself. And I haven't made it in a long time, but it sounds really good. Favorite food memory. I started my career in nuclear policy analysis. And I used to do this, I don't know if you call it like professional development or not, but it was like this trip you could apply to called Isidarko. And it was actually in northern Italy. And I went to that one like 2 or 3 times. And it was just a bunch of professors and students that would get together at the ski lodge in the Italian Alps, like 3 hours north of Milan. And when I think back on these things, I'm like, why was I traveling by myself to all these like remote places? Like a plane, a train, a bus, a taxi. Looking back, I was like 25 or whatever. It was a really great program and it was relatively cheap to do. So my company was covering it then, but it gained some popularity in this circle of people studying like nuclear policy. Italy has really strict visa laws and requirements. And so they wanted to do one for like Middle East and North Africa students that wanted to come, but they couldn't come to Italy. So they actually did one in Cyprus. So I went to Famagusta in northern Cyprus. And I don't know if people know, but Cyprus is basically like a split territory and the north is Turkish and the south is Greek. So we were in the north, very Turkish influence, essentially like visiting, a part of Turkey that's not connected to Turkey. And this was like not a lavish trip, right? Like Famagusta has a lot of history. It's really, really cool. They actually have like an abandoned hotel there and like a completely abandoned like hospitality industry. And so you can kind of tour these places. But I have this like refreshed memory of actually having the most fresh Mediterranean seafood dish sitting on the beach at a restaurant where it was like fresh caught that day. And I know people talk about that. For some reason in the Mediterranean there, again, not a lavish trip. Like there were cockroaches we stayed at like a university, which, I've been all over the place and I can take a can of hairspray to a cockroach, right? No problem. But I have this like beautiful memory that I sit back on and it's kind of like when you like see a beach scene open and there's like seagulls. And I just have this like the most delicious fresh seafood I've ever had on the coast of northern Cyprus, which is beautiful for so many different reasons. They have like cafe culture, right? Because it's too hot during the day, you go out at night. So even though it wasn't like a lavish trip for me, it was low spend at the time of my life. I have a great memory of that and like the tablescapes in northern Cyprus. And it makes me really, really, really want to get to Turkey. But yeah, that's the one that like pops into my head is this like beautiful memory of just this huge table and red wine and delicious fresh seafood.
You haven't been to Turkey yet. Out of all your travels, you haven't been to Turkey. So that needs to happen because Istanbul is amazing.
No, but I did go do you remember when they made you separate your laptop? I did fly through Turkey during that craze where you had to send your laptop to a separate counter. It was like a very short blip. I forget what year it was. I don't think so.
I've only transitioned through Turkey. And then I got out and, toured for 6 hours or whatever they let you do on the layover. But I never had to separate myself from my laptop. So
yeah, it was a very short time that they did this. I forget what it was, but it was a gut reaction to some incident. I'll have to look it up and send it to you.
It might have been around the bombing or something to that effect.
Yeah, it was chaos in the airport though. So it was like you had to literally hand deliver your computer to another table in the security line.
No, I just remember the border control being quite impressive. And in terms of, you wouldn't step out of line. These are like some Amazon looking creatures that are guarding the gates, literally. Let's go ahead and have you introduce yourself, and then we'll go into all the fun spaghetti on the wall conversation, as you were saying.
Yeah, all of the analogies we make. My name is Danielle Jablanski. I normally go by DJ or Jabs, and I currently lead the OT cybersecurity consulting practice at an engineering firm called STV. STV is kind of in the EPC world, which is engineering, procurement, and construction, but we also do a lot of architecture and design. So sometimes we say EPA, and we build a lot of rail infrastructure, utilities, and we do advisory services around that. And before that, I spent a year doing OT strategy at CISA, and I was also at Nozomi Networks for a couple of years. And I was a research analyst that looked at intrusion detection systems in OT. That's kind of how I cut my teeth. And before that, like we mentioned, I did some nuclear policy work coming out of Stanford University and other kind of nonprofit organizations that I worked with, Chatham House, and some of the like Carnegie, that kind of like funded philanthropy world around nuclear weapons when I came out of school. So that's my background in a nutshell. See, there's another one in a nutshell. There's so many.
Yeah. All the food puns for sure. We actually officially met. I think we've met at other places and other times, but we officially met actually in the green room right before both of us were going to go on stage and speak at S4. We were on two different stages, and it was really a bummer because we wanted to hear each other's talk.
I was like, hey, I wanted to hear you. Yep.
But thankfully they're recorded, so it's totally easy. We actually ended up having this like incredible conversation about food and water, like within for 10 minutes. And it was a very fast conversation. It was perfect setup for me walking on stage. I don't know if that helped your talk at all, but it was
black out every time, so I don't remember.
Yeah, actually, I'm so glad to hear that because I also totally black out when I do my presentations. Yep. And people tell me that's a sign that you know your material really well, and it's fine.
Oh, I've never heard that. Good.
I usually end up like kind of waking up halfway through my talks and being like, just to check in with the audience. And if people are resonating, they're shaking, they're nodding or whatever they're doing. Or if they're looking at their phones, I usually have to change tactics to wake people up. But that doesn't mean that we aren't present. It just means that we know what we're doing. Yeah, it was such a fun conversation that I was like, this is the coolest girl I've ever met. Like, and it's so, I was actually raving about you later on.
She's great.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah, and there was a few other people in the room too, and we were getting our hair or makeup done. I forget what it was. And yeah, it was such a great conversation. And then since then, we've just kind of been best friends, like totally chatting whenever we can. And there's a small group of us and of women in OT, and so it's nice that we can have common conversations and things of such. But what I actually really love is like the fact that you've really taken your whole career and it informs on anything you do. You've found a way to sort of bridge between the nuclear and CISA and what you're doing now and find the commonalities and be able to have common language and the way that you speak and present. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say anything negative about you when you've spoken. Even if they did, I probably have words with them. But, the fact that you are such a wealth and a well of information. And I learn something from you every time I talk to you. And I'm like taking notes usually when I'm talking to you because I'm like, oh, I got to look that up. I don't know what she's talking about. Or you're sending links to me quickly.
I'll still cry. Okay.
And you're sending links all the time. So I always feel really educated. So I'm so excited that you're here because we're just kind of riffed on like what your career looks like and what's going on with things in the world. And
I love how you always say systems of systems thinkers, because I didn't think about that until I met more engineers. And I actually joke with my partner. I said, if I could go back, if we won the lottery, I used to say that I would go back and get a PhD in like anthropology. And now I say I would go back and do material science. Because it blows my mind. And it's this like extension of engineering and physics that we work with in OT, but it never really dawned on me until I was later into my career. Like, I want to know what melts this. I want to know, because we talk about all these separate physical scenarios and real world outcomes and cascading consequences and all of this analysis that we do. But I never heard somebody frame it until you as like, if you're in this field and you like it and you're thriving, you're a systems thinker. And I was like, wow, like I always thought I was an analyst at heart, but you're right. It's different. I'm not just I don't like numbers that much, right? Like I'm not just an analyst for the sake of analyzing. I'm a systems thinker. And I love when you put that out there.
I think that the other thing is I recently learned over the last few years, and this is probably because I've met more people that are systems engineers and system thinkers as well. But I used to think that everybody thought like this. You kind of have a general default of how people think. And I always thought that people thought in spheres and thought, and hey, if something affects on one side, it affects the other. Like I thought that was common practice.
No, not at all. In fact, we are very rare and weird. And I now realize why I probably had trouble working with others at times, because I never understood why they could only think in a flat line and never saw anything else around them, or why they chose not to see anything else around them. Yeah. And maybe I've spent a lot of time with networking people, because I think networking general for IT, I think in system fear, they have to, because otherwise, I mean, how could they do their job? But so it's so funny to me that it took me until whatever age I am at the moment to, in general, in my lifetime, to realize, oh, yeah, so I'm weird and it's good. Okay. And I don't think like everybody else, and nobody else to think like me, but like, we really need to acknowledge in OT, we are system thinkers, because.
Or do you remember when you learned that some people don't have an internal voice?
Yeah, that kind of freaked me out too.
That blew my mind. I'm like, you don't talk to yourself audibly in your own head.
I mean, I know some people like name like their inner voice. I have not gotten that far yet, but I definitely do find it interesting that people don't have like just ongoing thoughts at all times.
No, I name all my vehicles, but I have yet to name the internal model.
And it's so interesting.
Quick break, and a huge thank you for being here and supporting the Bytes and Bytes podcast. I still can't quite believe we've officially come into season 3, and I'm constantly amazed by this community and all the conversations we get to have together. If you're enjoying this episode, please take a moment to follow the show, leave a comment, share it with a colleague or friend, and it really helps these conversations reach more people. You can find additional details and past episodes at bytesandbytespodcast.com. And you're always welcome to connect with me if you have feedback, questions, or ideas for future topics. And in more fun, personal news, my book with Wiley Publishing is officially moving along. The title is locked, the cover has been approved, and the manuscript is almost done. Securing What Feeds Us, Cybersecurity in Food and Agriculture will be dropping this autumn, and I cannot wait to share it with all of you. In the meantime, you can sign up for updates on events, pre-orders, and other fun things I am definitely still trying to figure out over on AnzenSage.com. I'm so excited for you to read it, and hopefully together we can continue to secure what feeds us. All right, back to the conversation.
The different sectors that we work in terms of critical infrastructure, a lot of those people are also system thinkers, but a lot of them are not as well. I know like agriculture is a great example, definitely systems thinking. You are dealing with systems, living systems that are constantly adapting and evolving in general. I do think that like the water, because you're dealing with the water cycle, that's also because you're also dealing with weather and the bugs. I'm so excited about bugs, and I'm so glad you brought this up. Later on in the season, we are going to have some insect people come on and talk about how food waste is actually food stock.
Yes,
and how we make, and how we actually engineer bugs to feed to chickens and other livestock to make sure they don't do things, or they somehow give them a boost of whatever they need. I had no idea. I had no idea. Like my brain did not realize our modern world runs off of bugs. Like I did not make that connection.
Yeah, and especially
I understand
the
pollinators.
Right. In the wastewater sector, I know that part, but I don't know the one that I know that how they have bugs eat down some of the waste and then they put it into pellets basically and then extract it. But I didn't know the reverse, which is what you're saying, the engineering the insects to feed like a microcosm in the diet of the food chain for them. That's great.
Yeah, it's fascinating. Like how, and also I think how smart, that makes sense because that's still playing to the natural world. And also, I mean, we have a whole pet industry that eats insects as well. Like, or like zoos and aquariums. I didn't even make the connection in my head. And now that I am, I can't unthink about it. Like, I'm like, oh, wow.
And this is kind amazing. Of a cool job.
Like,
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm so excited to eventually tour like a fly factory. Like, I'm so excited about that. And people are like, wow, you're so weird. I'm like, no, this isn't really weird. Cool. This is amazing. Like, think about like how humans have gone from, and I think about this all the time. And I was channeling you one night. We were watching the finale of MasterChef, the UK one. And I was sitting there and I had sometimes you're sitting there and all of a sudden like things just sort of like you have this incredible thoughts hit your head in one moment. Yeah. And this is exactly why I was thinking of you. And I thought, how did we go from humans that were eating raw meat to discovering fire and we could cook, and then we discovered fermentation, to we watch it TV and entertainment of people creating these little dishes with tweezers, with flowers and stuff to win the ultimate glory or whatever. Yeah. And I thought, wow,
there's this
amazing.
Whole evolution of like human nature becoming entertainment that we haven't even seen, I don't think, the beginning of. I mean, it's also the end of the Aldous Huxley plot, which is a terrible examination of human behavior. Somebody told me once a couple of years ago that they leased a vehicle because driving is going to become completely obsolete, and that people are going to go to basically like go-kart tracks to drive real cars the way that we used to, or the way that we do now and I was like, wow, that is some futuristic, I'm still going to buy my car, but people have this interesting vision of entertainment that it always kind of recreates. History is art is history, but human entertainment is a lot about human behavior. And I think it's so weird.
Yeah,
also, like the robotics now that are coming out. So I was at this manufacturing and SCADA event in Pittsburgh at the end of August, and I was talking about how I hate the AI bubble right now. And people are like, it's not even a bubble. And I'm like, I don't know what it is, but it's a lot of these companies are going to fail, right? Just by nature of the hype cycle and how these things work out. So I was talking to somebody in the robotics industry, and they were talking about how they had developed like the robots that were capable of lifting enough weight to do like the pallets in warehouses, and how now they've evolved the weight capacity that they can actually lift the EV batteries for semi trucks, for battery electric semi trucks. Yeah. So that's like a huge milestone. But it was funny because they said years ago when robotics took off, people thought that it was going to be like the Jetsons by now. Yeah. And we'd have all of these like home things, and I have like a motion sensor, garbage can. And that's good enough for me, right? Like I'm okay. And you see some of these like out of Asia, some of these like home robotics applications coming out for like laundry and kitchen and stuff like that. And the first thing that springs to my mind is like safety, like put your arm in that, whatever. And that's why it didn't take on. And so that was what was kind of a limitation in robotics. And so I'm really curious with like robotics, automation, the Venn diagram of robotics, automation, and AI. What are some of these use cases that sound good to people that are just completely going to fall flat because human behavior dictates that we do not want to replace that function in our lives? Like, I'm so curious about this.
Yeah. And also, if you think about it from the perspective of there's a big push in, I don't know if it's a generational thing or what's going on with that, but there's a big push for long form content as well as traditional ways of making things. So, I mean, think about probably the pandemic helped with this a little bit, but like obviously sourdough and baking it, or making like chicken stock from scratch, and all these like human type behaviors that we did for so long that got dismissed because we could just go to the grocery store and do it, quickly. But now people are rolling back to, and I want to say like, I don't want to necessarily say like homesteading, but yeah, there's a great example. People have this like real nostalgic desire to kind of go back to simpler ways because we've gotten so far to the technology side. I think that there's going to eventually be a balance. Maybe that's where the bubble will burst. I don't know. But there'll be some kind of a balance where AI and tech is just going to be more of a helper to us rather than a hindrance. And right now it feels like a hindrance because there's so much and it's not exactly working right at the moment.
Well, there's memes, right? That's like, I want AI to do my taxes, not create art. I want to make art, like different things like that.
Yeah, no.
Or there's that AI grill. Have you seen that? My friend has the AI grill, and it has the temperature setting. It has an app. There's a temperature setting, and you basically power everything into it. It tells you how to do it. It does like a whole recipe prep. You put it in there, and my partner's like, no, I like the taste of charcoal. We still have a charcoal grill because we like the taste, the flavor of it. And so, but I thought it was cool. So it's like, I don't know, is it marketing that convinces people that they need to, like, that's what I'm really curious about. Like these use cases, who will convince us that these use cases are worth, that these use cases are worth it. I'm not convinced on the driverless car. I'm not convinced on the robo-taxi. I don't know if it's a security thing for me, but like, I don't ever want to get into a robo-taxi. I'm all set.
Maybe it's partly because, again, as a system thinker, we can understand like the fail points in a different way. Do I think any of these things are bad necessarily? No. But original machine learning and automation, especially, this from an industrial perspective, was created with safety in mind. I do think robot lines are great, especially in like slaughterhouses where that's extremely dangerous occupation between digits loss and other injuries. Having robots be able to do that up to the speed of what a human can do could be really great, beneficial on a safety aspect. That's brilliant. But I also think about it on the other side of, well, what happens when one of these goes amok? Like, are we going to have to put people back on the line and to hurry it up? There's a lot of questions there for me. Do I think that like the pallet lifting that's amazing? I do think that those robots that flip up and down inside of, I used to call them big yellows because they were yellow at the time in the factories that I worked in. These things were amazing. They would fly down the line, lift up, pull the pallet off and just jack down real fast and go. And it was like terrifying to watch. At the same time, really cool.
Yep.
I think that's helpful for safety, especially efficiency. That's great. But again, I don't know, have we gone too far? I think about, maritime in this example with the seafood industry. They're floating IoT, OT devices basically at this point. I don't know, is that okay? Like, are we over efficiently doing things to the point where we're not considering, fish stocks or all that kind of thing? Fish farm or a farm, they're all using some type of digital technology on some level now. If they aren't, they will be soon because it's just part of the world and how sustainability is going to go. But are we branding sustainability with marketing for this? Because in order to be sustainable, we need tech. And that is pretty much what I'm hearing from science as well and researchers. But where's the line drawn there? Because how sustainable are things if it's not sustainable to create these things? So there's like this back and forth debate, and this is probably my internal dialogue really coming out now.
Well, my internal dialogue is I'm a control freak. So I always want to be doing something where I'm in the lead of whatever I'm doing. And data, I'm going to pose this question back to you because when we were talking before we started recording this podcast, I had done some research in back 2021 about the adoption of IoT across farming and agriculture. And I've told you about this, but I was asking you kind of like, are we on the 5th wave of automation for farming and agriculture? Because I've seen it in other industries. Like we know where it's pretty obvious what the industry 4.0 looked like for manufacturing, right? For automobiles. I understood that completely. If you told me industry 4.0 or industry 5.0 for farming and ag, I'd be like, is that big data round 3? Is that robotic arms? Is that floating IoT? Is that an expansion of available telecommunications networking that didn't happen before in rural areas? Like, is it burden sharing for satellite applications where I know that there's like farms in India where they all share different technical capacity because not one farm can own it. And they do that for like insurance, right? So that the satellite can come in and say, hey, we got all this drone footage. It's a shared cost, but now we can actually confirm that this drought happened or whatever. Like, is that the revolution that we're on? Like, which one is it depending on the sector?
I think it depends on what region of the world we're discussing, because that's actually a good point about India versus other places. I do think that we are definitely in a evolving evolution stage here with the next sector, but I don't know if it's 5th. I think that might be extreme. I think that probably the more AI that's brought in, I think that's going to crash to the next industrial moment, if you will. I do think that they haven't quite figured out that part yet. I have talked to a lot of data researchers recently in the farming industry and agriculture in general, and it seems like nobody's really got quite the handle on what's going to happen next. There's a lot of speculation, which is, on a positive note, it's very exciting. And what is this? And I'm really excited for what data is going to do. But on the other half, wearing my security hat, I'm like, I don't know about this because we're still not making things secure by design. There's a lot of questions there. Adoption's questionable because, like you said, rural areas still don't have clear internet. Satellite, things like that are still expensive for a lot of people. What is that actually going to mean? Are we forcing people into adopting technology, or are they okay with just using analog tractors? There's a lot of questions there, right? So I think it depends on the region of the world. I think it depends on the scale of your farming operation or your agricultural operation in general. But I do think that this is the part that's hard, is I think we're uneven with what revolution we're heading towards. Some might be regressing, some might be increasing. I don't know. Right now, I feel like we're kind of in this, I want to spin it positively, exciting times, I guess is what I'll say. But also I don't know. And that's something I think researchers can kind of agree to at the moment of we just don't know what we don't know. And there's a lot of what ifs and not sure moving forward. So I suppose that's probably what the beginning of another revolving upgrade feels like, as we don't know what's going on.
Well, that's why I love your sector. I put on this research hat and just look at it from afar. And I'm just so curious, if I put on a researcher hat and kind of analyze it a little bit, it's like, who is actually determining the drivers and the barriers? Because not only do you have those regional differences, but those regional differences are exacerbated by ownership models. So of course, in Europe, you have small family-owned farms. And in the US, you have these major conglomerates and monopolies. And so the rate of that evolution for data alone, we have millions of data points a day. They can measure the dew and the sunlight and the temperature and the soil and the bacteria, and they can isolate cattle, and they can put these, insemination over here. They have so much data for all of this, but I don't like creating an over reliance on monopolies, because then you have fewer single points of failure. And that's a point I've made in cybersecurity a lot of the times that I learned from nuclear, and it applies to almost every other industry. So at what point does tech make things so sustainable, efficient, productive that you have these massive conglomerates that buy everyone else out or are so far exceeding the curve that their products or whatever are just so much better, so much more efficient, more profitable, whatever the driver is in that case, that you're starting to see everyone else, their operations diminish or get bought up, that you create these monopolies, and then you've got three, like right now, there's a handful of major chemical manufacturers, right? I don't like how few single points of failure there are in that sector, especially how much they touch our food. So have we thought about that when we talk about automation and AI and the way that we're promising all of these benefits? And so like the chicken and the egg question for me is like, is it the use case or the marketing that comes first for some of these tools? And I've told you this story before, but when I researched this years ago, again, just for fun, not for fun, it was for a paper, for a job I had, but you'd go to like a conference and they said like, these are robot pickers for strawberry farms, and they're going to pick the strawberries off, and so that humans don't have to do it. And the farmers were like, no, we actually need people to check our rat traps because we have, physical labor that should be doing other things, and they have to go and see if the traps have closed and snapped and need to be replaced or not. And that can easily be replaced by a sensor. And I was like, wow, I never would have thought about that. It's like the most simple use case. It's easy to produce. It's low cost, and it would save so much time and efficiency. But you see these other groups and they're like, no, driverless tractors. And I'm like, who asked for that?
You know that nagging feeling? That one that says your operations might be more exposed than you realize, but a full-blown assessment feels out of reach? Traditional OT cyber physical assessments are expensive, time-consuming, and let's be honest, you get a point-in-time report that's outdated the moment something changes. That's not risk management, that's just a snapshot. That's exactly why we built AnzenOT, designed by practitioners who've been in your shoes. It's one of the first subscription-based platforms for continuous quantified OT cybersecurity risk management. Not just monitoring or threat detection, but actual risk modeling built for your facilities. Whether you're managing a processing plant, a distribution center, a zoo, or even a utility, AnzenOT gives you a living picture of your operational risk posture that evolves as your facility does, and turns that intelligence into actionable, prioritized tasks so you know exactly what to fix first. Subscription plans start at prices that might actually surprise you in a good way. Visit AnzenOT.com to explore plans and see how continuous facility-focused risk management finally fits your reality. AnzenOT, risk intelligence that evolves as fast as your operations do.
Don't get me wrong, the auto drive on tractors is actually really great on efficiency. They can drive in straight lines. That just makes it easier all along.
No, I'm genuinely asking, like, I want to know where they go to get these, what do their field studies look like?
So a lot of times, ag tech generally starts on the farm. So there is a really smart farm kid that's like, hey, we've got this issue. I bet I could come up with something, whether they're in college or they just start having ideas or talking to people. They create this tech, whatever it is. Mm-hmm. The latest one I've seen is giant bugs as weeders, like they're robot bugs that go and weed. But that comes from initially, hey, we have this thing. We should try to figure this out. And innovation happens and you've got access to technology and that kind of thing. So you start creating. The problem becomes as the VCs get it and they don't care. So they just will run the product to the ground. They'll market the crap out of it and then whatever. It's just this is not just an agriculture food type problem. This happens in all sectors. We've seen it many, many times, including security. I think the intentions are always good, but we know that the road is paved in gold. We've got it, but it doesn't always follow through. Agriculture in general will adopt technology that works for them. Just like you said, if the rat traps had sensors on them, that's great because then they don't have to go out and check them every day manually. They can just be alerted. Yeah. Or within food manufacturing, same thing. They also have those same traps that sit on the perimeter of their buildings. I look at that and think that's amazing. That's solving one problem, but that's also an endpoint that needs to be monitored. Mm-hmm. That's what I think in my head. But do people think that necessarily? Not necessarily, right? Because that's not something that they're going to pop in their head of, oh, I need to secure that because that could be an into my facility. They don't think that. Yeah. And that's kind of the where I come in and meet is, hey, just heads up, we should be thinking about these kind of things. Do I think that technology will continue to evolve? Sure. I think that we're going to come up with some really great ways to make farming and agriculture and food more efficient and easier to deal with on the supply chain aspects. What I'm more worried about, and I think we've talked about this too before, and I know you're alluding to it, is what's the Jenga peg, right? One thing that knocks it all out. We've already seen that with CrowdStrike and Microsoft. And when that happened, we all kind of went, ugh, because
the centralization risk.
Exactly. And I think that that's concerning. Food is very much already centralized in a lot of ways. There's only like 4 chicken houses, like big companies that own all the chicken houses. If you look at any of the big, your favorite brands, they're probably owned by a bigger brand, a parent company, and there's very few left. In fact, even pet food brands are being bought up in the same way as well. So I think this is the problem is that people don't necessarily want to do their due diligence to understand that. When they find out that there's only a few companies that own these things, it's very shocking. And it becomes sensory overload in a lot of ways because people don't want to necessarily understand that because they don't understand the food system. And this is where I think the real meat and potatoes, to use a full pun here, of the issues lie is the disinformation and misinformation with when it comes to how our food gets to our table. And it's really aggravating to the farming community because they don't, first of all, they're not being compensated probably for what they're doing. Let's be real. But the other part is that a lot of people think that they are still red barn tractor milking cows by hand. Absolutely not.
No.
The dairy industry is one of the most highly automated industries we have. And that is why it's under attack more regularly than any other sector because of that. The more connected you are, the more you're a target. But the other part of this is that people need to do their due diligence just as a general human being of where your food is coming from. It does not go from farm straight to your table unless you are literally buying it from a farmer. It has many steps in between, and processed food is different.
There was this push years ago for like that provenance or chain of custody aspect to put like QR codes on tons of food so you could, scan it and check where it came from. Did that die or is that still a thing? I've just not used at the grocery store.
So that is a really interesting concept. The transparency clause in FSMA is still somewhat tied to that. However, it's the corporations that probably nix that in the long run because that is just one more step that's really difficult to manage. The little tags that you have on your fruits and vegetables actually have little lot numbers on them, and that actually will link to where it came from. And that is important for transparency. But however, we know that those little stickers fly off, they stick to other things or whatever. It's not foolproof. You can't exactly, scan something into a tomato. You know what I mean? Like it doesn't really work. So the traceability rules are really interesting and they are there for food safety purposes, not just, anything else really.
But I wondered if that would somehow become like a key differentiator, right? Where you see some of these brands where it's like very clean, no seed oil, whatever the marketing thing is of the day, like if they had that provenance, transparency, something that would somehow set them apart. And then, these otherwise informed consumers, which is a very privileged way to consume, could then go, of course, it probably would be more expensive, but I was just curious if that would take off or not. And I'm also, I'm just here to actually bug you about trends that I looked at years ago, but like smart greenhouses, we've talked about that company App Harvest I looked into years ago, that they had a really cool system. My immediately thought for that setup was exactly what you said about the endpoints, was it was just so much connected technology and they had not really thought about cybersecurity because most startups don't, especially in a new tech business, right? There's these like incubators that I've seen one in Ireland that's really cool. I think Purdue has one. The university has a really cool incubator with Hewlett Packard, if I'm not mistaken. HP has a nonprofit wing that does a lot of research in ag tech. Very cool, but same thing. But the neat thing about App Harvest was none of their tech, it was their location. And so it was like Kentucky had like 5 truck routes out of that Appalachia that could reach all of the US basically in a day drive. And so it was like if other parts of the food industry fell down, they kind of had figured out centralization risk on accident, but only for like tomatoes and like a couple other products. Have we seen more of that like isolated analysis? I know that smart greenhouses kind of dropped off a little bit, but like where'd that trend go?
So smart greenhouses are actually pretty predominant and they're expanding, especially when it comes to leafy greens, because I have said this on the show and I will continue to say this. I always look at leafy greens with a little bit of suspicion, especially since there's no laws around certain ways that they're grown. And I'm not blaming anybody on any side on that. There's just a lot of situations that, whether it's just water runoff from a storm or something like that, that could cause a lot of problems. That's why people are going and buying from greenhouses. I buy my lettuce from greenhouses. I just find it's a little safer, I guess, is what I'll say. Now, I'm not advocating for either way. You do you. I just choose this route. Also, I really like the idea of promoting more technology-based growing, because I feel like as a technologist, as a cybersecurity professional, as all those things, I should be supporting that aspect. That's where my dollar's going. Again, I'm not pushing this on anybody, but yes, there's an absolute crap ton of tech inside of those buildings, and they are expanding. There's several brands, I won't name them, but if you've had, you'll see them in the store. I do find what they're doing to be quite fascinating. I also find it really interesting that they are taking like their uglier varieties of lettuce and bagging that and selling it as like ugly lettuce variety, which people are grabbing towards, because, you know, just because a vegetable has like a little dent in it doesn't mean it's bad.
There was like a service that did that, right?
Yeah, it was a food company that was doing that. They still do, actually. And I think that's really great, because I do think that like acknowledging food waste and things like that is really important inside of these particular industries, or where are they sending their food to. Again, because I've worked in zoos and aquariums, a lot of the food, human grade food gets dropped off at zoos as well. Yeah. So I think that that's important to do that as well, because, you know, a gorilla is not going to care if it's got a little bit of a bruise on it. They're still going to eat it.
Right.
So that's really interesting. But yeah, I do think that we should be looking at that, especially with global climate change, because obviously like Florida may not be growing oranges. It might be Ohio, you know, and they might be growing papayas. I think that we're going to have to bring things into greenhouses a little more regularly. I think about Japan a lot too when I think about greenhouses, because they've got that technology pretty on lock now. They are growing strawberries that are like the most amazing things on the planet inside of these greenhouses. So, I mean, there's an ability to control and perfect in greenhouses, and it's really interesting tech for sure. What I do worry about is, can we adapt that out onto the, you know, take it out of the greenhouse? Can we adopt that in a different space? Because the greenhouse is a stationary unit, right? You can control that situation just like a factory, right? But everything else in agriculture is moving. It's a moving target. So how do we do that in a way that isn't cumbersome to the people that are in those sectors, while keeping them safe and secure, and also making them realize that it needs to be safe and secure as well, not just because it has to happen because of compliance. It's because we need to make sure this is happening.
Well, and because there's so much interdependence. I mean, that's what I harp on in my practice. I mean, I talk about competence, I talk about capacity, and then capabilities, because there's been this huge rush to buy tools, and then we don't know how to use the tools, and then you're only as secure as your weakest link. And that could actually be one of your tools, or the way your deployment works, or your coverage and things like that. And so thank you for letting me interview you on your own podcast. But I mean, that single point of failure is not just a monopoly problem that we were talking about, where more companies own things, but it's also this kind of over adoption of technology and over reliance. And I mean, when AI did start years and years and years and years ago, this machine bias question of, even if I lean into the technology, how much can I trust it? What is the integrity of that data? And that's really where OT security comes into my mind. Is like, this is what I borrowed from nuclear, and I've done this for years too. And it's not really an aha moment, but when I talk to people about their OT, it's not the loss of control that I'm worried about. It's the question of integrity that you've never thought through. So years ago, when I wrote a methodology for my London Council Fellowship, I did it on a prison case study, specifically because they use PLCs for their doors, and it's a hub and spoke model. And a lot of the operators in that facility don't actually think about the network connectivity of PLCs, right? Yeah. But then they have all this other connectivity, including food, right? So they have their commissary, they have apps, they have the library, they've got vehicles with video recording and footage being sent back. There's tons of connectivity that's already been exploited. There's a bunch of prison examples out there. And I brought all these OT cybersecurity experts to the table to discuss these scenarios in a prison setting that they'd never thought of like, what are all these third-party risks of people bringing the food in and having all these apps and connectivity to the spending and education and all these things. And the reason I bring this up is that they looked through the NIST 800-82 scenarios. There's like 6 in that document that could apply to all the different sectors. And we worked through this methodology, and we did some ranking essentially for these scenarios. And they were actually prepared for a loss of control. They knew what it looked like to create, some kind of order out of chaos if the doors weren't functioning properly, or what the biggest risk scenario would be to health and human safety in their facilities if there was a loss of control. But there's one in there that basically is like, information or data is sent to an operator that would then cause them to take the next step in the operation. So the actual critical flaw would be the next function of an operator. And then the exploit was just manipulating the integrity of the data they received to then alter something in the operation. And nobody in some of these like controlled research that we did on these different scenarios was prepared for that scenario. The compromise of the integrity of the information they received to then take the next step in that functionality. So maybe some sensor reading is saying, in your HMI, hey, this kind of the Oldsmar example, the water incident in Florida that wasn't actually a hack, of like, hey, this chemical is wildly off. You actually need to enter in this new setting, right? Your new set point should be X. And you're actually being manipulated to do something that you've now created the exploit or the issue or the incident in your environment. But it's because that integrity was completely called into question. And if you can't tell me that integrity is protected, it's the always never rule in nuclear, right? Nuclear systems, weapons have to always be ready to function and never accidentally go off, right? Always never. Yeah. That principle in all of these OT domains is so difficult to pinpoint and protect all the time.
It's so interesting you bring it up because ultimately it's about what's your risk tolerance and risk understanding. I think, again, this goes back to system thinking because we're always evaluating risk in a spherical way. And even that aha moment of, I never thought about it like that, we still get those, of course, because we're not privy to all information. It's interesting because while you were saying that, and this is a really bad comparison, I'll be honest, but I remember having a conversation with different CEOs and presidents of zoos. And somebody asked me how close we were getting to Jurassic Park. They didn't mean like the dinosaur aspect. They meant like the gates and how electronic locks.
The best part of the movie.
Yeah. And I smiled because I said, we're probably never going to be there because there's always two secondary. There's your internal, which is for the animals, and the external is for the people. I said, maybe on the external for the people side, we might have electronic locks. And I'm sure in many places that can afford them are already there. I'm thinking of the big zoo houses, but there'll always be a key. There'll always be manual process. And this is where I get worried about the more we automate, and the more we push forward, the more we forget and lose the manual aspects. And this is actually something that lessons are learned recently, especially with the different attacks that have been happening around the world, all those retail hacks that have been happening in the UK. They actually are, the government's going forward and asking people to have a physical, paper documented an incident response plan, because we need to have that even to that level. And this is actually something that I really enjoy with working in food and agriculture, is a lot of them already have their manual processes on lock, but the problem is that those people are retiring and they're not capturing them. So that whole aspect of managing risk from the aspect of the subtle nuances of how to do what your job is.
Standard operating procedures.
Correct. Needs to be implemented. So it's a business risk at that point too. So it's how do we tie in all of this OT situation and risk? And for me, I find that as long as I tie it into safety, people get it. It's the stop, drop, and roll moment. We all have that ingrained into us, and whatever culture you come into, we understand that's what you're going to do in a fire. Yeah. I also think that movies and TV, I think people need to be reminded that's not real life, and that scenarios. We need to, exactly. So like even the prison scenarios, like, whoa, that's not necessarily the case. However, I do think that it's,
I will say some of the Hollywood scenarios are pulled from research. So like Mr. Robot, I actually worked with the same research team that their prison episode is about. And they actually show their research. It's a father-daughter team. And they're cited in my Atlantic Council work. They actually show a printout of their paper that was presented at DEF CON, I want to say in 2012. And it's a real world scenario. But that manual operations, the standard operating procedures, there's a lot to borrow from nuclear there as well, because the intercontinental ballistic missiles, the ones that are in the silos in the western part of the United States, still have a 2 turnkey system.
As they should.
We're talking about all these technological advances and satellite imagery about our second strike capability and how many seconds we need to be able to respond. And so there's a huge debate, there has been for 10 plus years in the nuclear weapons community, of whether or not there's this dead hand reaction of an automatic second strike capability. And what really kind of threw that off years ago was social media. So how do you confirm things happening in real time that take review, revision, quality analysis to say, yes, this did happen, or no, that didn't happen? And we were seeing all these tests out of North Korea, and actually people were finding out about the missiles tests on Twitter faster than any government agency could confirm or deny it. So you could actually create this like misinformation capacity that would then skew your response capacity. Of course, weapon systems there's not a really great analogy to most of the OT, right? But if you're talking about mean time to recovery and dollars that amount to seconds or minutes down, there is a large impact typically. So the safety aspect works sometimes, but then other times it's just mission critical, right? You have to do it because it's demanded of you. And so when I got to SCV, when they hired me, I was like, this needs to be part of our standard of care. Like if we're doing engineering anywhere in the world, we need to offer cybersecurity as a greenfield recommendations. Like if we have people working on HVAC and we say we're going to build this building and here's the list of the systems that go into that, we need to do one more step and say, of these systems, these ones have vulnerability disclosure processes. These ones require compensating controls. These ones are a little bit more insecure by design. These ones lack encryption, right? We need to go one step further. And SCV was like, I get that. Like they bought into that from an engineering practice. But some owners and operators don't have either of those oaths. I don't know what else to call it, right? For that mission critical to be so important that it's baked into everything they do for cybersecurity, that it's tied to that mission. It's tied to the standard operating procedures. It's tied to their manual operations plans, right? That's the missing link I see in that. What's the driver? What's the barrier? Are they ready for the technology? Is it just a lot of marketing, right? Because I always remind people cybersecurity is a completely unregulated market. And I joke all the time with my friends, you and I could start a company today, get $30 million in seed funding and sell anything to anyone, saying that it has these capabilities out of the box, single pane of glass, right? We could use all the marketing and just be as convincing as possible. You and I are very capable of being, in our leadership roles, and it could completely fall flat and not meet the mission. And then we would have convinced people to care about something and then not solved any problems, not made anything better. And that's a huge factor in this field.
That is why maybe cybersecurity in general is not really played well inside of food and ag, because it's an extremely trust adverse, and you have to earn that trust type of environment. I've seen people kicked out of food factories. I've seen people get kicked out of agricultural settings because they weren't trustworthy or they lied. I think that may be why, and I'm not saying that all cybersecurity are a bunch of snake oil salespeople. I don't think that's true.
Not all.
But I do think that it takes a different type of understanding, people and process over the tech. If you don't deal well with the people and process, the technology is not going to do shit. To be honest. But that's something that I've noticed too, especially when I talk to different sectors inside of food and ag. A lot of people are like, I'm just not a technology person. I don't understand this. And I said, well, do you use your phone? Do you use email? Well, yeah, of course I do. That's just part of life. I said, sure, but that also makes you somewhat capable and have an aptitude for tech. And they're like, I don't see it that way. And I said, I do. I definitely do. I think that people who are, I think about the younger generations in general, and I sound like I'm so old, but I'm not. They were doing, modifications on HTML for like social media before we even knew what that was.
Yes,
you know what I mean?
That's me. I did that.
And that's something that I find to be really interesting is like, it just depends on your perspective, right? Do I think that food and agriculture need to have all of the new automated everything AI? No, I do not. I think that people need to proceed with caution and test and verify that it works in their environment and do not add another attack vector for whatever purposes that they need.
You mentioned the younger generation, and I think that's why I remembered that Purdue incubators, because there was somebody who had gone off to college and they come from a farming family and they were kind of unsure if they wanted to do family business. But I lived in Iowa, I have a lot of farming friends and family, and there's a debate in those families of like, who's the next generation? What does this look like? Can we keep this going? Is it going to be profitable? What happens this winter? All these different contingencies. And there was like a really cool story about young people going to university, learning about new tech, bringing it back to the farming and agriculture kind of practices that they came from and trying to enhance things and do startups and try these cool new tools. But then, like you mentioned, they have to go get that funding. And they have to market it, right? And they have to bring it, proof of concept, all these things that get back into that technology world where I think some of those use cases and drivers start to skew a little bit, unfortunately. And I don't know how we fix that. But I did want to tell you one thing that I don't think I've ever told you before. My first job out of grad school in nuclear policy, I actually lived in Iowa City, and the job was in Muscatine, Iowa. And so it was called the Stanley Foundation then. Now it's the Stanley Center for Peace and Security. And this was one of the Stanley family, the New Yorker poster in my office was one of the Stanley family pieces, like in the office when one of the Stanleys actually passed away that used to run the company. And this was given to me when I left there. And it's how New Yorkers see the world, because I was born and raised in New York and then moved to the Midwest. And so it's like this joke about how we see the rest. And Muscatine is just written in there in pencil, and you can't see it. But it's in there somewhere near Kansas City, just written in. And if John Deere is right there, one of the headquarters, and they have all the tractors lined up. And so there was always this weird overlap with my professional life and farming and agriculture. So John Deere a lot of farming families there, and then including my partners, and then the Heinz and Kraft factories. So I always used to joke that it smelled like macaroni and cheese everywhere on the river when we would go to work.
That's funny.
And then also Han Furniture is the other big industry, and Pearl Buttons. But the other reason I bring this up is like you mentioned all of these, you can always look back in your career and draw a line. But we always point out in OT these processes around us and how we can see electricity, we can see water. And for some reason, food never gets to that part of the conversation of like being so critical. No. And I always think about it from chemical, right? Because I worked in that a little bit in government, but we don't see people driving down the road enough and seeing, Nestle, Starbucks. Like, where does this all come from that we put into our bodies, and how do we facilitate more awareness of all of these different like interwebs of technology and AI, and even the reference to the robotics industry and like where it's going and where it's been. And honestly, my question is like, who cares about it? Because I want to know people that care about it. And I just think that that's really interesting. And that's what your platform has done for me, is to help me find other people that are like, I love this conversation. I know so little. That's me, right? And I want to learn more. I want to learn which bugs eat waste. I want to learn, which companies own too much and might be a risk factor for that monopoly. I want to learn what the incubators are doing for the farms in Ireland, just because I like learning. I
really do find it interesting that we talk about food, we celebrate with food, we say goodbye with food, we have disorders with food, mm-hmm. we go to coffee, we go to lunch, we do all these things, right? But yet nobody has had that conversation of how do we protect it? And the people that are on the front lines that are doing this work are just still so completely flabbergasted of why no one knows. Like, we have removed ourselves so far from our food that, I mean, there's literally kids that have never even really seen soil before. I mean, we have really come to that place now.
Right.
Or the fact that people don't really understand what food insecurity really is. And there's so much disinformation and misinformation running around it. And then you have this whole subgenre of influencers that are pushing supplements and different diets and different ideas. And I'm not saying anything that's bad, like whatever, have your own opinion about it. But we have created this mess. We have created the complexities here. This is a human problem. Mm-hmm. And I feel so honored to be with these people and working alongside them in this industry. It's so humbling to me every day. And it's also so infuriating because there's such a part of me that wants to just scream from the rooftops of, hey, there's so many people doing amazing things, and stop saying bad things about this community and don't think that way. And
that's kind of how I felt when I started to learn like the utilities space, right? Line workers. Yeah. And there's actually a day of recognition for line workers. We just like don't think about them the same way we think of like emergency response personnel and 911, dispatcher. They should be right in that same category, right? Like
it's
people
like
that put your power back on.
It's the sexy factor, right? Like, it only becomes important when it's right in your face. People don't think about that. Nobody's going to spend time to think about firemen, right? Until there's a fire in your house, right?
Well, and like educationally, I think it would be amazing if first, I don't know what political and economic powers right now, or obviously there's a lot of contingencies that apply, especially to education. But if I look back, we always joke like we took civics, right? I definitely took civics, but we didn't learn a lot about the world around us. And there's this joke that like I learned to play hot cross buns on a recorder, but I didn't learn how taxes work, right? Very true.
Yeah.
I wonder why food and the economies that shape how we get food out of season even, right? Why is that not taught as part of the curriculum for economy, right? Economics in school, the same way that like diet is taught in health education. Why is that food economy left out of so much of that like civic or economic criteria for our base education is,
or even
citizens.
The conversation of how food impacts war, or whether, armies move and things like that. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so water is definitely left out, it's definitely not on the table either. It's in the glass. Haha. Anyways, it's so fascinating. And it's something that I'm still actively curious about is what I'll say. Yeah. I don't think I have a good answer for that. However, I will say that I have a lot of hope because we have a lot of college students who listen to the podcast who are pursuing an agricultural degree or animal science or vet or something to that effect that want to take electives that are about cybersecurity and about tech. And they're trying to figure out how they blend their careers. So this actually is happening, which I'm so psyched about. But the problem is there still isn't a larger conversation around it. I mean, this is why I'm excited about my book, because I'm actually going to have it in one place finally, rather than having to scour the internet. And not just because like I'm writing it and yay, it's my book, but the fact that there's finally something that's it's there. I think that there's a lot of professors out there that are doing a lot of really good research and work, but they need to be brought into the spotlight because nobody knows that they're doing this good work.
Hi, we're AnzenSage. And if you're in food production, agriculture, and even running a zoo or an aquarium, we need to talk. Because let's be honest, your operation relies on a lot more technology than most people realize. Grain dryers, hatchery controls, life support systems for animal habitats, all connected, all critical, all often overlooked when it comes to cybersecurity. That's where we come in. At AnzenSage, we help industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks. Without the fear tactics, the fluff, or the 200-page audit you'll never read. Whether you're producing milk, processing seafood, or running life support systems, we focus on what matters, keeping your operations safe, your people protected, and your business running, even when things go sideways. And hey, we know not everyone on your team speaks cyber. And because not everyone on your team speaks cyber, we've created a free resource library at AnzenSage.com. Inside, you'll find sector-specific infographics built for teams in agriculture, seafood, zoos, and aquariums. They're clear, practical, a little witty, and designed to help frontline teams understand the risks without needing a translator. No logins, no email required, no catch, just usable tools that make cybersecurity stick. If you're responsible for keeping food moving, animals safe, and systems online, AnzenSage is your partner in real-world resilience. Visit AnzenSage.com to download your free infographics, book a consult, or just learn more about how we're helping critical infrastructures secure what matters most. AnzenSage, helping the industries that grow, feed, and inspire the world manage cybersecurity and operational risks.
So I studied international war, basically civil violence. I went to Rwanda. I studied genocide. I went to Northern Ireland. I wanted to be an international lawyer at one point. And my master's capstone was, I studied in the Middle East. I studied Arabic. And I looked at the future wars over water scarcity in the Middle East, and desalination and how expensive it is, and how all of these, how global warming will change, some of the, will displace people in the future. So that was actually what my master's looked at. My capstone of my master's. My master's was international security and Middle East geopolitics. But I didn't think about tech. And then I got into the tech world, and I was looking at the rate at which the Middle East spends on cybersecurity is 25% on all their new projects. It is incredible, right?
Yeah,
and so to take and beg and borrow from how different regions are kind of incorporating security into their new markets, right? Their new, what's that city? Is it in Dubai, that like row city that they're building? Have you seen
The Line?
That? Yeah.
It's a line. Is it called The Line? Yeah.
It's insane, right? And so, but my point is like that, those ideas started with exactly the multidisciplinary approach you just mentioned. And it's one that I don't think we feed enough in the US, at least that I've seen in education.
No, we don't. But there's a lot of change. So I'm going to keep coming back to hope for this because there is I've seen a lot of it. So I've actually been sponsoring a Northeastern graduate class for a few semesters with my good friend, Dr. Darren Detweiler, who's also been a guest on the show. He is a food safety expert, but he teaches environmental social governance classes, so ESG classes. And what I've been doing with these graduate students is we assign a region, and each one of them picks a country out of a region. There's predefined, so it's not like everybody. That would be a lot for me to manage. And we add a cybersecurity lens onto it. Now, none of them are cyber. Some of them might have a cyber degree, some of them do not. A lot of them have policy or their foreign policy or something like that. But having them look at different regions and countries and from a cyber lens has been super fascinating. So like, where's your point of failure? Like, what's going to cause problems moving forward in these regions? Are they developing nations? All these things. So it's really interesting because they focus on one country themselves, but then they have to come out as a group and talk about the region around those countries. And I'm telling you, like some of the stuff that they were researching and talking about was one of those things that even took me back. Like I wouldn't have thought about like underwater cables as an example, because it's not something I would think about, even though that's how the internet is delivered in some parts of the regions. And it's interesting to talk about how the countries are interacting with each other when it comes to cyber. There's a bit of a standoffishness in some regions of, oh, this is an attack vector, you could hurt me this way. Or more of them are like, hey, if we bound together and have these more common goals, then maybe we won't do that to each other. It's such an interesting way to look at it from that like ESG perspective. So I have a lot of hope that there's some interesting ways of looking at this and moving forward. I really do. I will see people that have agricultural degrees with a minor in cyber. We'll see cybersecurity, agriculture. We'll see all of this at some point. I mean, I'm probably walking myself into my own PhD at some point. Yeah, let's be honest. But,
I'm curious for your book, is there a section on like global transportation and commerce and how food is delivered and like, yep. I mean, you know, Taiwan, people don't realize how much food comes from Taiwan, and that's a geopolitical consideration. Like when I took a course on, it was like terrorism and illicit crime. And I learned that the number one smuggled good into the US for a long time was cigarettes, right? Like these kinds of things. Is this part of like how things move, essentially how food moves, right? Food and food products. Is that a portion of your book?
Yes, I definitely put it there. And also having a future conversation. What does the future look like in that regard as well? Or what's the speculation coming forward? And if anybody's listening who wants to contribute to that, please just give me a holler. But
I'm so interested, like ports and container shipping and how much it would slow down the economy to search every container. And what does that mean for food security and supply chains? And we talked about all these ship to shore crane vulnerabilities. And for a long time, everyone was screaming about that. But it's like, it might be a necessary evil to get the goods and products that we need for our economy to keep moving. So what's the trade-off?
Yeah, this is actually such an interesting conversation because it's a lot larger than just my book, because there's so many subtle nuances that you could just go after with that. This is going to be a glide overview, but I'm sure there's going to be several books that will come from this at some point. Or I'm hoping other people will spin off and write their own as well. I'm not discouraging people from doing that type of research and work. But what's interesting to me is the supply chain, the food supply chain, the global food supply chain even, is so huge. And there are so many segments to it that to talk about it in such a subtle nuance is going to be really hard in this regard. But I really am going to do my best to try to touch on all points because we have to. Nobody's talking about this, or at least nobody's talking about it in this capacity on a very loud way. There are people that are really great about it. Now, in terms of like food inspection and things like that at the borders, like you said, there's a lot of contingency there at the moment of how we're doing that. So it's going to be interesting to see how different nations respond to that based on where the food is transferring from. We also have invasive species that have decided to jump ship because of that in a lot of ways, whether it's animal, insect, or plant. We're dealing with that. Witchweed is a big problem in the United States. I'm not going to get into what it is. Feel free to look it up. There's a lot of other things that are happening.
I did visit New Zealand a couple of years ago for work, but I also have family there. So I was lucky enough to be able to see some family and go. And you like can't bring running shoes into New Zealand because of the, introducing organisms and things into the environment that would otherwise, cripple parts of their ecosystem. And I was like, I knew about that coming back into the US, right? I couldn't bring, a coconut from the Bahamas or whatever, but I'd never seen it going the other way. And how serious and adamant they were about it. And I was like, wow, I mean, I knew that this mattered, but
I think people, when they think the black market, they don't think food or animal, but they are the top two things that are probably the most traded. And people are like, well, why animals? Like there's so many varieties of reasons of why animals get traded. It's pretty disgusting, to be honest. Sure. And I don't want to get into the ethical dilemmas of all of that. It's gutting, actually, really how much we move products like that and nobody knows. But there's so much to that side of the industry that's really deep and dark. Probably somebody could write a whole book on that.
I'm just individually curious what we can learn for safety and security from transnational crime that we can apply to cybersecurity and,
correct. And maybe that's just a book in itself. Some editor might be listening to this and want you to write it all.
No, not me. Not I.
Yes, but I have so much hope, in general. There's so many unanswered questions, but to me, the unanswered questions are also an opportunity to be able to figure out how do we work with this and how we do it. But again, that's just my systems thinking hat coming back on. Like, there's so many different subtle nuances and so much to this. But we as human beings did this to ourselves.
Complexity.
We did this.
Yeah. What do you think is the next ubiquitous thing? So for farming and agriculture, when I looked into it, it was drones. Like drones had become small and affordable, and so more could use them for more applications. What do you think that next thing is?
Drones are so cool. Actually, I was talking to a farmer the other day who just bought irrigation drones, and they're really cool. They're very cool. They're actually bigger than you think they are. Because when people think drones, they probably think of like the hobby drones that aren't so big.
I think DJI, just because Nozomi did a lot of research on DJI.
Yeah, drones, of course. But that's what most people think when they think drones. These are like the big drones. But yeah, I think that tech is actually going to become even more accessible. And I think you're going to see that more regularly or readily available for farmers at a different price point. They are expensive. It's no joke, though. They are still really high up. I think the next big thing is actually going to be something that we're not necessarily going to see. I think it's going to be, what are we doing with all this data from all these data points? And how is that going to be used to drive consumer purchase for different agricultural sectors? I think data is really going to be the next big thing if I'm thinking about this in a definitely a holistic manner. Because AI is there now, it's going to take a lot of that big data that we've got and start making some sense of it. I think it'll be really interesting because there's so many touch points for us as consumers that we don't even realize.
Yeah. Water scares me. And then seed breeding. They've gotten down to such a granular level, right? Of being able to create and scope the breeding process to get these seeds. And again, the big houses own that too. Yeah. But like, if that's all computerized, big data, et cetera, what system do I need to game to alter that product in a way that I can impact that supply chain? And it also comes back to the next supply chain attack in food and ag. Perhaps that's a big one. Perhaps.
I mean, that is definitely one of the ones to think about. But the other thing, you've already mentioned this is, and you've seen this in lab demonstrations as well as I have, are we going to know if it's actually been attacked because the system has been rigged to have a green light instead of a red light? So that is something that is already happening. We've seen that in the chicken plant in South Carolina that was chemicals were being introduced at the final phase rather than when they're put in the beginning of the phase, which is very dangerous for people to consume. But thankfully that was caught and dealt with. We've seen it with the Disney allergen attack. That person is now in jail for changing the allergen issue to say that it's a non-allergy when it was an allergy. That I think we're going to see more of that on a consumer level, potentially as an attack factor. That scares me because the food safety teams are very aware of it. Food defense is very aware of it, and they are making a lot of contingency plans for that, business continuity as well as disaster recovery. But the problem is that we don't know what we don't know. And because we've got so much data, we don't know where that data is going or what's happening to it. So there's a lot of like circle the wagons, if you will, that needs to happen in that perspective. But I do think that we're going to see some really interesting data manipulation moving forward, whether that's, like you said, seed, or whether that's consumer products or whatever that is. And I want to say a little bit more outside of the food we ingest. What about the stuff we put on our bodies? We wash our hair with, our soap, those kind of products.
Counterfeit for that. Oh my God.
Yeah. And that's actually something that's hit the market as well. That's actually something that's traded on the black market too, for sure. I do think that is something that's going to be really interesting moving forward as well. Is it's not just the ingest, it's what we're doing, anything that comes in personal hygiene. That's going to be really an interesting moment as well in terms of data and how that's manipulated.
I've done some incident response plans for food warehouses, but I would love to be part of business continuity and disaster planning for some of these big brands, like not on the crime space, like the Tylenol issues, right, where they had to then put the safety caps on. But I'm curious, like I would love to be part of some of the systems thinking around, wow, we didn't think about this criticality or vulnerability. It's been brought to our attention, and this is how we fix it. This is how we solve for it. This is how we build those plans in to recover, to build that resilience, to continue our operations, to make sure that it's a healthy and safe product or environment. I would love to be part of some of that. And I know I have a daughter, and to hear you say that you have hope, while there are so many scary stories and examples and things out there, right, that can harm and kill us, it really does make me feel a little bit better about raising a tiny person in this world.
Well, I think it's because I spend so much time talking to the people that are closest to the product. So I have a lot of hope because I know that they're good people and they're really trying to do things correctly and right and care. I just think it's the stages that are a little bit after that become that muck it up a little bit. It's that middle management layer, if you will. And that's the problem. And I also think that, there's a lot of disinformation, misinformation because of marketing and
it's hard to be an informed consumer, right? We can't overlook that. It is difficult. It is time consuming. People are busy. They have so many priorities. This
is why I think it's important that people need to go on farm tours and they need to understand the product and where it's come from and understand the people that are producing it. I do think that I would be highly encouraging to anyone to do that. Just do not please mess with their Wi-Fi or do any of that weird stuff while you're there. That's what I would say. Please don't touch that stuff. I do think that it's important to, especially at an early age, and we've talked about this before off air, is introducing to this is where your meat comes from. This is where your veggies come from. We've had those conversations. I have those conversations with my niece and nephew as well. Yeah. I really want to make sure that we're not just saying, oh, it comes from the grocery store, which is not an incorrect statement, but also is incorrect.
Yeah, it just shows up here. I haven't gone quite to the farm, but I teach a class at Dallas College and Middlebury Institute Online. It used to be the midterm, but now it's the final paper. and I actually do a bottling facility, and it's a Dallas bottling facility. It's a subsidiary for Coca-Cola. It's like Southwest Coca-Cola beverage or something like that. And so they get a portion of the product from Coca-Cola, but you don't get their recipe, right? Their secret recipe. Yeah, and they mix it with the soda water. And so I give them all of the batch operations in the facility for bottling, labeling, et cetera, like everything that happens. Then I give them the Coca-Cola business model, right? This is how they have these kind of distributed supply chains. This is what gets sent here, and this is how they make money off of that, right? Because they're not actually responsible for the entire end-to-end product, right? It's distributed, there's subsidiaries, yada, yada. And then I go through and I say, like, here's a plant network, and I say, here's a recent update for a Wi-Fi thing that they've done for the plant, and I basically have them act as consultants and look at this network topology that's like, there's some obvious things, like it's missing a DMZ, but there are actually pictures of the facility in Dallas that have like open PLC racks online that you can on Google. And so I walk them through this entire kind of put your security hat on, and as a consultant, tell me what we could do better, what we could bring in-house, what you would recommend exporting, what we don't necessarily understand, what we can learn from other breaches. There was a Pepsi incident that I link into the thing. And so it starts that systems of systems thinking is really the main takeaway. And if they've been paying attention to the whole force, they can borrow from every single week to say, oh, the MITRE attack tells me that this is a vulnerability in this type of a facility. But I really look to see at the end of the day, are they building on what they've learned to apply it to the real world, which is something that they consume, not understanding not only this equipment and machines that make that happen, but the processes and the layers of how it gets from A to Z. So not an organic product, obviously, but one that's manufactured that I hope is like illuminating for students where they're like, wow, I have never thought about the world around me like this. Of course, we do a week on the electric sector, right? I actually have Kylie Flanahan as a guest lecturer. I use a recording of her describing the grid to the students, but yeah, that's mine for my class, which is a bottling facility. And there's so much that goes into a bottle of Coke that you have no idea in that process. And so
it's the rubber meets the road for me. Is anything that is the technology touches inside of our food is not only a food safety concern, it's a cybersecurity concern. And then anything that's cybersecurity is a food safety concern. So I think there's a lot of joint realities that are happening now, which again contributes to, in terms of our sectors, that will be the latest and biggest thing coming up is how do we take all that data and all that understanding and people and process and actually merge it into a proper risk management process and prioritize it without giving people fatigue. And that's the trick, especially in food and agriculture. We can't fatigue people because they're already fatigued. So I don't want to do that anymore. Like, well, here's your priorities. These are your actual priorities that are going to make an impact to your bottom line and your business, as well as the food that you're creating or harvesting.
And that's where I see cybersecurity companies swallowing like the pride of like, use our product everywhere all the time. When I see a company or a product that says, you're not ready for us yet because these are your priorities, or you need to work on this, or you need this framework, or you need this structure in place before you can deploy our sensors or our single pane of glass. That's where I'm like, aha, like they get it. This is great. We can work with this. And there's a lot of companies that do that too. So again, we talked about the unregulated ones and how much money you could make, but there are some companies that say, hey, you're not ready for this tool yet, but we'll help you when you're ready for it.
I also think there's a market for helping to get to a readiness of whatever that is as well.
That's me. That's why I left government. I just didn't see enough readiness. Yeah, I'm right there.
I think that's actually something that's really interesting. And I realize that this is an extremely long podcast episode, but that's okay. And I do think that what's really interesting is the subtle nuances and different aspects of, emergency response, preparedness in terms of, where is our food coming from? How are we going to get it? What happens when there's an acute issue that happens in a community, disaster-wise? How do we share and shoulder that burden? Countries that are community focused first, it's probably a lot easier. In the United States, we're more individualism and not necessarily community, which is really stressful. So it creates these big, wide gaps. I do think that we have to look at risk differently in the future, especially with AI coming in and tech and different data points. There's a lot to this. It's a very big, very stressful space.
Do you know of any con-ops for like hospitals and schools or facilities just for food incidents?
No, unless it's food safety related.
Right.
If it's food safety, food defense issue, yes. But even
I
then,
just mean supply chain, right? Like, what would you do if X supplier?
So the JBS incident's actually a really good one to call out on that, because they actually didn't know what to do on a regional level, and it caused a lot of chaos and backed up. Because we actually supply a lot of food to overseas. The United States actually is a huge producer for food overseas. This is where I have a lot of issues with what's going on with China, because China needs us to feed their population.
Soybeans,
so they're not really going to mess with us as much as people think they are. Again, this is my opinion and my speculation in that perspective, because I have a different understanding.
No, this is what they teach in school. So I have a master's in international security, and that cooperative, like semi-cooperative, dual hegemony is the reality. Like there's this whole conversation of how many Chinese students study in the US. Well, you're not going to, have a massive armed conflict with a country that you're actively sending multiple students.
I agree with that.
There's soft power and hard power, but I'm right there with you in that line of thinking.
I think that it's interesting that because it's a cooperation that's there, which actually is really good for international relationships. I think that's actually really great. Yeah. Do I think that Chinese nation buying up farmland in the United States is suspect? Not necessarily. It's kind of continuing on their food supply for their nation. However, I can understand where people would be a little uncomfortable with it because they're misinformed or don't have all the information.
Right. And the reliance on tech and the security implications, I think, is a totally separate conversation from the one we're having. But yeah.
Exactly. And I also think there was, I'm sure you saw the 60 Minutes special.
I haven't seen it yet, but I'm aware of it.
There's plenty of little clips you can watch and stuff that ran about the Littleton, Massachusetts water facility being taken over by the Chinese. Now, I grew up in Massachusetts, so I know where Littleton is. And it is rather a strange place to target. But you and I, being security professionals, think, oh, cool, test bed. Poke, let's see what happens.
Muleshoe, Texas.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah, no, absolutely.
But I also think that I think sometimes that these soft relationships that are there, the soft political relationships you were saying, I think sometimes people need to be reminded that they can do things in order to get things moving again. So there is probably purpose in poking in different utilities to remind people that, oh, hey, we do have our finger on the button here.
And culture, like you were saying, with food being such a big part of everyone's culture, that is a soft power leverage. And I mean, another one that was huge is like one of the first leaders from China to visit the US, I believe came to Texas, if I remember right, from my education, for a ping pong tournament. Okay, soft power goes a long way.
It does. And if you think about too, like, Japan had a really bad harvest season. I don't remember the year and date for rice, and the U.S. helped them out by sending rice, and they didn't want to buy our rice because we didn't have the same quality of rice as they were used to. So there's a lot of cultural, subtle nuances to this as well. Like, hey, if you're not going to grow up the standard that we expect, we don't want your stuff. Yeah. So it's this really weird real world we live in right now where the UK might be a viable place to grow rice at some point because of the way climate change is going, right? So, but who's going to buy that rice? Because maybe it's not the kind of rice that they want. Like, there's kind of a lot of questions there. There's a lot of really...
Bring this back, not to make it about me, but back to the thread. I just remembered one of the people at the Stanley Foundation in Iowa was editing this book about the history of Chinese relations in Muscatine, Iowa, of all places, like talking about small towns and cultural impact and soft power. Xi Jinping, 1985 visit, part of an agriculture study mission, and has since led to numerous cultural exchanges and business partnerships. The Friendship House, established in Muscatine, Iowa, serves as a hub for international friendship and cultural exchange. And I remember my good friend at this company, she's the comms director, was editing this book all about Chinese relations in Muscatine, Iowa. And I was like, I never would have guessed. But you have so much going on in these agricultural regions that we don't pay enough attention to.
It is so interesting based on cultures have intersected within American life in general and how we perceive certain foods and things like that. I mean, what do you want tonight? The conversation isn't, I would like meat and potatoes. The conversation is, what type of cuisine would you like? Because that is what will determine the meal you're going to make. I think that a lot of people forget how that's soft power in itself in a lot of ways is our choice, our power of choice. Were we going to continue to have that choice? I don't know. Because again, global climate change is going to be really interesting. The data is showing us some really interesting figures of how that's going to affect pricing and things of such. I'm not even going to get into the pricing with the grocery stores and things like that and all those other things. And I think a lot of people had a lot of misunderstanding of what's going on with the markets right now because of it. It's really fascinating stuff, but fascinating on a research level, not fascinating on a human aspect. If I have to spend more money, like, that's not fun. But there's so many. I mean, this is sometimes I wish I could go back and you want the anthropology degree. I'm thinking sociology, like the whole social aspects around this and how it derives culture is so fascinating to me. And we'll see. I guess is what we'll say. I think this has been such a fascinating conversation for me. I always, again, left with being stimulated on an intellectual level when I speak to you, because it's just, there's so much. And it's
Thank you.
just
This
so
is a little
fascinating.
outside of my day-to-day wheelhouse, but it's something I've been interested in for a really long time. And I think more people should care about it. I honestly wish I could spend more time caring about it as well. And so I cannot wait to read your book.
And I think the fact that you actually even acknowledge that this is a thing is like the majority of the battle for me, because I can't even express to you how many times people are like, why is this a problem? Or why should I care about this? Or who? And I want to snap back and say, did you eat today? But I have to be like polite.
My introduction was actually how much water is wasted. When I did that research, the very first thing I looked at was how much water is used and wasted by the agricultural industry, and then the reasons and how people were working to try to fix some of those problems. That was the very first thing I looked at, and I was like, oh, wow, this is very connected.
There's so much water waste actually, and just water used in general in food production, regardless of agriculture or not. It's a ton of, and people don't realize how much water actually really impacts their day. Not just because you like brush your teeth and drink water, but there's so much that goes into the creation of the things around you with water. Thank you so much for being here and everything that you shared. I literally find you to be a ball of wisdom, and I find it so fascinating. The way your mind works is incredible to me. So I really enjoy our conversations. And I know that to the listeners, this probably feels like it was all over the place, but literally this is a stream of consciousness. It's
a stream
exactly
of consciousness is how I exist. Yeah. Thank you. I really appreciate that. And I appreciate everything you do for the community. Thanks, Kristin.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you so much to Danielle for being here today. That was such a fun conversation. And thank you for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, please follow the show, leave a review, and share it with someone who definitely needs to hear it. Remember, stay safe, stay curious, and we'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.